How many times have you pushed a shopping cart through a bright, modern Canadian supermarket, only to feel a strange little tug in your memory? That quiet moment when you glance at the spotless floors, the glowing produce aisle, the neat rows of branded shelves, yet something deeper whispers, this place wasn't always here. Maybe it was once a Dominion, maybe a miracle food mart, maybe a Nob Hill Farms warehouse so cold you could see your breath. Behind every Loblaws, Metro, or Sobeys today, there's an entire hidden world grocery kingdoms that shaped Canadian life, then vanished, swallowed by mergers, rebrandings, bankruptcies, and time itself. And once you uncover them, you suddenly realize how many pieces of Canadian childhood quietly disappeared without anyone noticing. Before we step into this forgotten world, tell me in the comments, which old supermarket from your childhood do you remember most vividly and what made it special for your family? And if you love journeys into Canada's lost memories, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell because we're about to walk through aisles that no longer exist, but still live inside the Canadian heart. It's strange how grocery stores of all places play such a deep emotional role in our memories. Not because they were glamorous or dramatic or exciting, but because they were part of life itself. They were where families showed up every single week, year after year. The smell of fresh bread, the sound of carts rattling over tiled floors, the cold blast of air from the frozen section, the rush of a Saturday morning shop before hockey practice. These weren't just buildings. They were backdrops to childhood, parenthood, immigration, growing up, growing old. And the stores we're about to revisit were giants, huge names that once dominated Canada so completely that their logos were burned into everyday life, and then almost overnight they disappeared. If you grew up in Ontario, there was a time you couldn't walk 3 blocks without spotting those bold red and blue letters. Dominion. Founded in 1919, these were more than stores, they were institutions. Families stepped into Dominion the way you step into a familiar living room. Wide aisles, bright lights, the unforgettable aroma of the bakery mixing with the sawdust from the meat department. For decades, Dominion didn't just sell groceries, it defined what a supermarket felt like in Eastern Canada. And then the 1980s corporate world swallowed it whole, carving the stores into new chains. By the time people realized it was happening, entire neighborhoods had lost a piece of their identity. Or maybe your memories drift instead to Miracle Food Mart, the discount superstar created by Steinberg's. These stores didn't rely on fancy decor or luxury experiences. They relied on honesty, plain black and white flyers, big bold letters promising real savings, a suburban plaza anchor that felt like a weekly ritual. You'd hear the frantic beep of cash registers. You'd smell the bake-off bread wafting through the air. And if you were lucky, you got to witness their conveyor belt pickup system groceries sliding out to the parking lot like magic. It felt futuristic at the time. Today it feels like something from a dream. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to walking into Nob Hill Farms. If you grew up in the GTA during the 70s, 80s, or 90s, you remember it? The moment you stepped through those turreted, castle-like doors, the temperature seemed to drop. Concrete floors stretching endlessly, pallets stacked to the sky, a warehouse so enormous it made you feel tiny, like you were on an adventure rather than a simple grocery run. Parents pushing huge carts with determination. Kids staring at mountains of bulk goods in awe. The slogan said it plainly, the largest food terminal in the world. And it felt true. It felt like no other supermarket ever built. But it couldn't survive the wave of small format discount stores that took over Canada. And so, like a giant falling, it closed in 2000, its final breath echoing across generations. Out west, the story was different, but just as powerful. Before Sobeys arrived, Safeway was the crown jewel of Western Canada. The red background, the white script logo, the famous Lucerne brand, the feeling of walking into a store that seemed cleaner, brighter, calmer than anything else. Safeway felt like quality, like reliability, like the place your parents trusted. Full-service counters, trained staff, warm bakery scents, polished floors, and that unique sense of being in a store that took pride in every aisle. When Sobeys bought the Canadian operations in 2013, everything changed not overnight, but eventually enough that people could feel the shift. The Safeway name still exists, but the Safeway era, that's gone. And if you were from Quebec or Eastern Ontario, you didn't go grocery shopping, you went to Steinberg's. It was so culturally iconic that the name became a verb. Bright stores, fresh prepared foods, bilingual staff who knew the community, a bakery smell that wrapped around you like a warm blanket, and hypermarket innovation long before it became common. But corporate collapse comes fast. By the early 1990s, the giant was gone, its pieces absorbed by rivals. For many Quebecers, losing Steinberg's felt like losing part of home. Across Canada, from Woodward's food floors out west to the humble, cozy neighborhood IGA stores of the Atlantic provinces, these supermarkets weren't just stores, they were living reflections of Canadian life. You can almost hear the old price scanners. You can almost feel the paper bags. You can almost see your parents comparing flyers at the kitchen table, planning the weekly shop. These memories don't fade easily, they cling to us, and that's why revisiting them matters. If you've ever felt like something was missing from today's clean, standardized grocery landscape, it's because all these places once gave Canadian life its texture, its variety, its identity. And as we continue this journey, we'll uncover even more vanished name stores that once defined entire provinces and then disappeared like snow melting in early spring. Are you ready to keep walking down these forgotten aisles? The deeper you walk into these forgotten aisles, the clearer it becomes that every vanished supermarket tells a larger story about Canada itself, its suburbs, its families, its values, its quiet revolutions. And as we move into the next wave of lost grocery giants, the memories grow richer, stranger, and even more unbelievable because these weren't just stores that disappeared. These were symbols of changing times, changing habits, and changing expectations. They rose with optimism, peaked with national pride, and fell with the pressure of modernization. And somewhere in between, each of them carved out a place in the lives of millions of Canadians who still remember them as if they closed only yesterday. Take Miracle Food Mart's towering companion, the legendary Miracle Mart department store. If you were a kid in the 70s or 80s, you remember stepping from the grocery section into a world of clothing racks, toys, household goods, and that distinct mix of detergent and fresh bakery air drifting across the aisle. Today's one-stop shopping feels efficient but cold. Back then, it felt like an event. Families didn't just buy groceries, they made a day out of it. You'd help your parents load bags into the car, plastic crinkling in the wind, and then get dragged next door to look for shoes or school supplies. And as you walk through those beige-tiled floors, you always felt like you were part of something big, something stable, something safe. But the truth is, stability never lasts. The collapse of Steinberg's pulled Miracle Food Mart down with it, and suddenly the plazas that once brimmed with life began to shift. New logos appeared, new discount strategies took over. But no matter how efficient modern stores became, none of them recreated that mix of warm chaos and suburban charm that Miracle Food Mart mastered. And then there was Nob Hill Farms, the ultimate warehouse kingdom. If you grew up anywhere near the GTA, you didn't just go to Nob Hill Farms, you survived it. The automatic doors would open and a wave of cold, cavernous air washed over you. You'd hear the echo of carts rolling over concrete, the hollowness of huge ceilings, and the rhythmic clicking of cash registers firing like mechanical heartbeats. There was a ritual to it, the weekend pilgrimage, the search for the best deals, the shared silence of parents calculating costs in their heads while kids stared at towering pallets of produce and cereals. Those pallets felt like cliffs. The entire store felt like a world where everything existed in excess, giant boxes, giant bags, giant lines. It was overwhelming, yes, but it was exciting. You felt small in the best possible way, like a tiny explorer wandering through a frozen industrial wonderland. Yet beneath its grandeur lay a vulnerability. The format was too big for a world shifting toward convenience. When it closed in 2000, an entire generation felt the loss not because they needed the store, but because Nob Hill Farms represented a version of Canada that no longer exists. Simple, communal, unpretentious, and unapologetically massive. Out west, the story took on a different tone. Walk into a pre-Sobeys era Safeway, and you felt a kind of quiet elegance, something rare in everyday shopping. Safeway wasn't flashy. It wasn't trying to impress with size or theatrics. It promised quality, comfort, and dependability. The staff felt trained, polished, even proud. The bakery's smell of fresh French loaves drifted through the aisles like a warm welcome. The deli counters gleamed. The butcher's department was clean, precise, and respectful. It felt like the kind of place where your parents trusted the produce without checking every item, simply because Safeway earned that trust over decades. When Sobeys bought the chain, most Canadians didn't expect much to change. But slowly the design, the branding, the atmosphere shifted. And while Safeway still exists, the Safeway that defines suburban Western Canadian life, the one that felt like a community pillar, exists now only in memory. Back in Quebec, Steinberg stood as more than a business. It was cultural identity. For decades, families said, "Je vais au Steinberg," instead of "I'm going grocery shopping." Imagine a store so deeply woven into everyday life that its name becomes a verb. The staff remembered customers by face. The bilingual announcements gave the stores a rhythm. You could feel the pride. This wasn't a generic supermarket. It was a Quebec institution, modern, bright, ambitious. Its bakery filled the air with a distinct warmth, a scent so tied to memory that people who grew up with Steinberg's swear they can still recognize it today. But even giants fall. By the late 80s, corporate collapse tore through the chain. People watched in disbelief as their hometown staple disappeared, piece by piece, sold to rivals. Losing Steinberg's wasn't just economic, it was emotional. It was like losing a landmark without a demolition. One day it was there. The next it was simply gone, replaced by unfamiliar names that didn't carry the same heart. And then came Woodward's Food Floors, the elegant, refined grocery experience tucked inside department stores. For families in British Columbia and Alberta, shopping at Woodward's felt special. Not fancy, not pretentious, but special. You didn't just run in for milk. You walked through warm lighting, rich aromas, and displays that felt curated rather than stacked. Cheese counters, baked goods, the soft hum of conversations. Everything had a European market feel. And after grocery shopping, there was always that irresistible stop at the lunch counter: grilled cheese, soup, hot coffee. It was a ritual as comforting as winter evenings by the fireplace. But department stores across North America were collapsing, and Woodward's fell with them. By the mid-90s, the iconic food floors were gone, leaving behind only the ghost of an era where shopping was slow, deliberate, and deeply satisfying. In Ontario and Atlantic Canada, another name carved its identity into the everyday rhythms of working families: Price Chopper. No frills, no illusions, no fancy decor. Just bright lights, metal racks, and the promise of savings. It was the home of clipped flyers, coupon culture, and families stretching budgets $1 at a time. Those stores were loud, busy, and unapologetically practical. Parents would stand in the kitchen at night comparing deals, circling items, preparing for the weekly haul with determination. Price Chopper didn't need elegance, it needed honesty. When it was phased out in favor of Fresh Co., the name vanished. But the memory of bargain hunting in those aisles stayed alive in every family that grew up learning how to make every cent count. And then there were the IGAs of Atlantic Canada, small, cozy, community-driven. The kind of store where the cashier knew your name, the butcher asked how your week was going, and local farmers saw their products proudly displayed. You'd walk in and feel like you were stepping into a neighborhood gathering spot, not a corporation. When the name faded, the loss wasn't commercial, it was personal. All of these stores, these names, these memories, they weren't just chapters in Canadian retail history. They were chapters in people's lives. And the deeper we go, the more we uncover the emotional roots of these vanished supermarkets. The ones that shaped entire regions, entire generations, and entire family traditions. As these stories unfold, something becomes clear. Vanished supermarkets aren't just about retail history. They're about the little rituals that built the rhythm of Canadian life. They're about the way families moved through the world before smartphones, before online shopping, Before the pace of life sped up and everything became efficient, but somehow less meaningful. When you peel back the layers of these long-gone stores, what you find is not just old shelves and faded logos. You find the heartbeat of a country that lives slower, thought differently, and connected more deeply. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the smaller, humbler chains that quietly shape the daily life of entire regions. Stores like Food City in Ontario, a chain that didn't try to dominate the market or dazzle customers with extravagance. Instead, it understood the importance of being dependable. Food City was the kind of place you stopped into on the way home from school, where you ran into neighbors, where you found the familiar shelves of Oshawa Group staples that every household kept stocked. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't need to be. The charm was in its simplicity, the warm buzz of conversations between customers who recognized one another, the smell of hot coffee drifting near the front, the subtle hum of the refrigerators echoing down aisles lined with everyday essentials. Food City didn't try to be everything. It tried to be enough, and that's what made it special. In the 70s and 80s, these stores were woven into the fabric of newly built subdivisions, places where young families were planting roots and carving out the fragile beginnings of community. Over time, as the grocery market polarized between luxury and discount, Food City was slowly pushed aside, absorbed into the rising wave of price chopper locations. One day you walked into your neighborhood Food City. The next day, the sign was gone. The logo had changed. The atmosphere wasn't quite the same, and another familiar piece of everyday life quietly faded into memory. But long before any of these chains existed, Canada's supermarket revolution began with a name that sounds almost whimsical today: Piggly Wiggly. Before the modern concept of self-service shopping became normal, grocery stores worked on a clerk service model. You told someone what you needed, they fetched it, you waited. But Piggly Wiggly didn't just break that system, it turned it upside down. When Canadians first walked through those turnstiles in the 1920s and 1930s, they were stepping into something revolutionary: the ability to choose your own items, handle them, inspect them, and wander freely. Imagine how strange and liberating that must have felt at the time. Aisles designed like guided pathways, shelves filled with products customers could actually touch. A new sense of independence that changed not only how people shopped, but how they thought about shopping. It was the spark that lit the fire of modern grocery retail. And while Piggly Wiggly's Canadian era didn't last beyond the 1930s, eventually absorbed by Safeway, its impact is still everywhere. Every aisle you walk through today echoes the bold decision to let customers guide themselves. Piggly Wiggly didn't just vanish. It transformed into the very structure of Canadian supermarkets. These vanished chains weren't just businesses, they were signals of change. Each one marked a shift in technology, in community, in economics, in the way Canadians lived. They represented eras, moments in time that defined how families ate, gathered, and shared the ordinary rituals that make life feel grounded. And when those chains died, the eras died with them. People didn't always realize it then, but decades later, when you drive past an old plaza or a repurposed building, something in you stirs, a feeling, a memory, a faint image of your parents walking ahead of you, pushing a metal cart, comparing prices, holding a paper list that they double-checked aisle by aisle. It's not the stores themselves we long for. It's who we were when we walked through them. There's something powerful about remembering the grocery trip as a full family event. In the winter, bundled in thick jackets, breath fogging in the air as you rushed from the cold parking lot into the warm store. In the summer, the shock of cool air conditioning as the doors slid open. Kids lingering near the candy aisle, hoping for a small treat. Parents hunting for sales. The slow, steady rhythm of the weekly shop. A ritual that anchored families in the middle of everything else life threw at them. Even the smallest details come back with vivid clarity. The clatter of coins being counted at the checkout. The soft rustle of paper bags. The worker at the deli counter who always said the same cheerful line. The way your parents joked or hurried or patiently taught you how to compare prices. These memories stick not because the stores were beautiful, but because they were reliable. They were the backdrop to thousands of tiny moments that shaped who we became. And that's why these vanished supermarkets feel more alive today than many modern stores ever will. Modern grocery chains are efficient, clean, predictable, but they don't always have character. They don't smell like sawdust or fresh hot loaves from a baker who knew exactly how you liked your bread. They don't echo with the deep voices of butchers calling out orders. They don't have conveyor belt pickup systems or castle-shaped entrances or bilingual greetings that made you feel grounded in your community. They don't carry the imperfections that made the old stores feel real. Every vanished chain had something distinct. Dominion had its comforting familiarity. Miracle Food Mart had its honest, no-nonsense energy. Nob Hill Farms had its overwhelming scale, a place where the size alone etched memories into childhood. Safeway in the West had elegance, a sense of quality that felt almost luxurious in a distinctly Canadian way. Steinberg's had identity, a cultural pride larger than the aisles themselves. Woodward's had refinement, a gentle beauty layered into every corner of the food floors. Price Chopper had the practical grit of families stretching dollars. Atlantic IGA had warmth, community, and the feeling of being truly local. And Piggly Wiggly had innovation, the spark that shaped it all. As you look back at these old supermarkets, you realize just how much Canada has changed. The suburbs stretched out, plazas shifted, and corporate chains tightened their grip. Life became faster, busier, and more solitary. What once felt like a shared ritual slowly turned into a quick errand. What used to anchor a community became another checkbox on a long list. The unique character of these stores was replaced by a polished, standardized version of shopping that feels efficient but far less human. Yet the memories don't fade. They live quietly in the back of your mind, rising every time you step into a modern store and instinctively wonder what used to stand there decades ago. They remind you of a time when grocery shopping wasn't rushed, when it was part of your family's weekly rhythm, when certain stores held the smell, the sound, and the feeling of growing up in Canada. Because what made these vanished supermarkets unforgettable wasn't just their names or logos. It was the ordinary moments they held that later became priceless. Inside those aisles, life unfolded in small, meaningful ways. Parents taught kids how to compare prices. Grandparents picked out the bread they trusted for Sunday dinner. Teenagers grabbed snacks after school. Newcomers learned their community by recognizing familiar faces. These stores witnessed families growing, neighborhoods evolving, and entire eras changing. Their disappearance didn't happen all at once. It was quiet, almost invisible. A rebrand here, a merger there, a closure that felt temporary but never reversed. One day the signage changed. The bakery smelled different. The scanners sounded unfamiliar. And even if a grocery store remained in that spot, it didn't feel like your store anymore. Sometimes the buildings still exist converted into gyms, discount outlets, or furniture warehouses. And if you walk inside, you might feel something familiar. The shape of an old aisle, the corner where the bakery once stood, the wide entrance where the carts lined up. It's like hearing a song you haven't listened to in years, but still remembering every note. That's why names like Dominion, Miracle Food Mart, Nob Hill Farms, Safeway's earlier era, Steinberg's, Woodward's, Price Chopper, Atlantic IGA, Food City, and even Piggly Wiggly still stir something inside you. Not because you miss the stores, but because you miss the part of your life that unfolded inside them. We move forward, but these places stay behind, frozen in memory. And every time a familiar scent hits you, or you hear an old grocery store sound, or see a layout that feels strangely familiar, a part of you steps back into a quieter, simpler world that vanished before you realized how much it meant. If any of these forgotten stores sparked a memory, maybe a smell, a sound, a moment, share it in the comments. Tell me which vanished supermarket was part of your childhood or your hometown. And if you enjoyed this walk through Canada's forgotten aisles, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the memories we rediscover next.